All right, the book Liberation, as everyone can see it now. I'll ask everyone to mute themselves if possible, so there'll be no external noise. And, sorry. And except for Soraya, of course, who's doing the reading for us.
Yes.
I believe everyone here is familiar with the book. For those who are not familiar, after this first reading, we do a very quick recap of where do we stand in the book, where do we stand in this story. So let me go ahead, Soraya.
Okay. Chapter 15, Help at Last. Enthusiastic about what our instructor was doing, Saldanan displayed gestures of almost childlike humility, and both he and Leonusio began to cooperate with us in our preparations to bring the case to an end. Both suggested that they be allowed to stay there with us so that we would not unwittingly awaken the fury of the ignorant spirits who would be against our purposes. They might organize themselves into a threatening legion and ruin our plans. The pair knew procedures of assistance like the one we were using, and they were well informed about the potential of the enemy region, from which hundreds of adversaries could instantly rise up against that home, which was ill prepared to resist such an attack. As I listened to their opinions, I was concerned about Gaspar and could not hide my misgivings about him. The hypnotizer, displaying a highly disagreeable presence due to the fluids he was emitting, was not taking part in our discussion. His semi-glazed eyes could not focus on us, suggesting a sort of soul paralysis or thought petrification. I was unable to contain my curiosity any longer, so I asked Gubbio about Gaspar's situation. What was the meaning of that? Okay, wait.
Sorry?
Okay, no, the letters went a little smaller. Okay, it's okay. I was unable to contain my curiosity any longer, so I asked Gubbio about Gaspar's situation. What was the meaning of the psychological mask he was wearing? He seemed deaf, almost blind, and completely unfeeling. He answered long and point questions with vague monosyllables, and he displayed an unbending insistence on punishing his victim. The instructor was now free of concern and explained, Andre, there are many obsessors who are markedly hard of heart when under the influence of persecutors that are even stronger and more wicked than they. These fearsome intelligences of darkness control specific paraspiritual centers of certain spirits who are wicked and ungrateful towards the good. They use them as instruments to extend the evil they have chosen to sow. Gaspar is in that situation, hypnotized by lords of disorder and anesthetized by numbing rays. He has temporarily lost his ability to see, hear, and feel clearly. He is held in a troubling nightmare in which Margarita's suffering is his single obsession. Won't he ever be able to regain his natural senses? I asked in amazement.
Okay.
Of course. Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
We're going to ask everyone to mute themselves. And unmute for questions, please, or for comments at any time. Again, this is a group study group. The participation of everyone is not only welcomed, but I think it's necessary for the general good of the group as a whole. So enthusiastic about what our instructor was doing, So the very question, what was our instructor doing, right? So let's have a quick recap of what Gubbio has done so far in this book. He rescued Saldanha, and Saldanha, for those who remember, was basically the right hand of the main conspirator in this tragedy, the big, powerful man in this power, which is Gregory, who is the big leader of the lower zone on that, let me call it here, this empire, where he was kind of emperor over that empire. And Saldanha was his right man in this project of bringing Margarita back to the spiritual world as soon as possible. So he rescued Saldanha. How did he do that? So Gubbio did that through the rescue of Saldanha's son, his daughter-in-law, his wife, and equally important, the judge that was his main enemy, Saldanha's main enemy in the past. He also rescued Leoncio, and Leoncio, if you remember, was the right hand of Saldanha. So would be perhaps the second important, more powerful person in this project of obsessing margaritas from the big boss, Gregorio, right? So Saldanha has been somewhat rescued, and you see later on why I'll say somewhat, and not done that by magic, not done that by convincing him in a discussion, in a speech, but demonstrating the powers of love, demonstrating the power of goodness by rescue Saldanha's son, daughter-in-law, wife, and the judge as well. And rescue de Leoncio, again, but not on say, come with us, we can do good things for you. Also demonstrating the power of goodness in a very palpable way, in a way that is undeniable to anyone, to Leoncio primarily, through the rescue of his son, who is being tormented by a nurse, Felicio, and through the rescue of Felicio himself. So what you can see is a cascade of events of the exercise, the practice of charity, the practice of good. And that is the means of converting individuals who are weak, who have a heart closed by pride, by selfishness, to goodness. Not by amazing speech, but by working. And there is this cascade of love that bathes those two individuals and becomes extremely strong. And when we say that love is irresistible, that's exactly what we mean. We can speak of love as much as we want, but love in action is what is indeed irresistible. And these two individuals had been witness, have been involved from inside out. So the love that they have inside of themselves becomes stronger than the wickedness that they still have. Of course, nothing happens automatically, everything is a process. And that's what Gubbio has done so far in order to help the main project was that it is indeed to rescue Gregorio. Please go to the steps. of helping so many individuals. And then to the question that we usually would have, I'm sorry for the telephone ringing. The question that people we had in discussion here, couldn't they just use their power and just take a Gregorio out of that and just purify him? Well, perhaps we could. I don't know. Frankly, I don't believe it's possible because I believe that everything is a process, and I believe that evolution is a process. It doesn't happen by magic. But assume that we could do it and say, oh, my objective is to rescue Gregorio. I take Gregorio out of there, put him in somewhere else and whatever. How would those individuals be helped? Starting from Saldanha's daughter-in-law is still incarnate, from the son is still incarnate, for the wife discarnate. How would Leoncio be helped? How would Leoncio's son be helped, still incarnate? How would Felicio be helped? So you see here that we are all in this huge spider web, so to say, intertwined amongst one another. Who would know that the act of trying to rescue Gregorio would indeed mean to rescue, to help so many individuals that at a first glance has nothing to do with the Gregorio. But when we put the pieces of the puzzle together, or perhaps take it apart, you will see how we are so codependent, so to say. How our good actions spread like wildfire and reach so many individuals. And that's what Saldanha has done so far. It started that fire of goodness, and it's spread and it's reaching so many people with one single objective that would be to rescue Gregorio. So many people benefit from it. And in this we have now Saldanha that is quite concerned because now, okay, he is converted. I believe that at this point he is pretty sure that he is on Gubbio's side and no longer on Gregorio's side. That Leoncio the same thing. But still there is a good number of workers of Gregorio still doing the work of obsessing this lady, Margarita. And one of the things that Saldanha proposes here is the question, and the spiritual question they always have, of quality versus quantity. Does quantity number really outweighs quality? And you cannot deny that quantity plays a strong role in everything. You know, the old example that everybody's used. Take a little piece of wood, fine piece of wood, take one, it can break easily, take two, it can break easily, take three, becomes a little bit hard, takes 10 and it can only break anymore because now the quantity is stronger than the quality of the person who was breaking 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and becomes impossible to break 10 or 15 of it. If you got to stick by 1B, it stings, it hurts a little bit, that's fine, no problem. If you got stuck by 10 Bs, you may have a little fever, you may assume that you're not allergic, right? You feel a lot more pain, and you may have some constitutional symptoms. You have a little fever and everything, but everything should resolve. if you get stung by 100, 150 bees, you have very high risk of death, of anaphylaxis. So does number mean something? It means a big deal as well. And so Danya here expresses that the number of still wicked spirits, of spirits under the control of Gregorio in this project of harming Margarita is immense. And it's in the blink of an eye, Gregorio could send hundreds of his workers to counteract the actions of Gubbio. And Gubbio is humble enough to say, yeah, it's true, it's indeed. Their numbers is pretty high, and we would not outstand, would not be able to counteract the powerful attack of wickedness if they all mount up together against us. It's obvious that quantity plays a very strong role in this discussion. In the midst of all those that is still weak, those are still on Gregorio's side, we have Gaspar. And if you remember from the previous reading, Gaspar was the partner of Leoncio, was the two spirits who were there constantly at all times, weakening the threads of Margarita with the physical body and accelerating her discarnation so she could go back to the spiritual world as quickly as possible. And Leoncio has been, as I have told you, rescued. He was now with Saldanha assisting Gubbio, but Gaspar was extremely unapproachable. And Andre Luiz was really baffled by that presence of Gaspar that seems to be almost in a different world. And then I don't know if you have the opportunity to see individuals with some kind of mental illnesses that are extremely distant, that we have opportunity to converse with them, and they will respond as if they were talking to someone else completely different, completely distant. Mind is completely distant from the present, for the presence. And that was the presence for the way that Gaspar appeared to be. And Gubbio explains that that individual is being hypnotized by very strong minds. That he is not still a ovoid, but he is pretty much an ovoid-like mind. He's almost not acting on his own will anymore. He's almost like a puppet at the hands of these strong hypnotizers that have kind of taken control of some of his centers in the perispiritual, as Gubbio explained here. There are many obsessors who are markedly hard of heart when under the influence of persecutors that are even stronger and more wicked than they. It's very important that these very strong, very powerful wicked minds, they will not be able to penetrate, to control a mind that is not leaning towards that direction, that does not have any affinity with that kind of energies. But of course, in this case, Gaspar already has affinity with the wickedness, with the desire for revenge, for control, for doing harm to others. And that little bit or a lot of it is enough for him to be used as an instrument by even stronger individuals. So Gaspar is his own wickedness allows him or makes him a good instrument at the hands of more powerful wicked individuals. And that is his situation right now. He is a victim as much as he is responsible to be the victim of other individuals. And he is responsible for what he's doing, of course, even if he's under influence of others. He is responsible for everything that he's doing. And then Andre Luiz questions, won't be he ever be able to regain his natural senses? And then now here you're gonna follow the answer of Gubbio. Any questions, any comments at this point? Okay, so we can continue.
Okay. Of course he will. Magnetism is a universal force that follows the direction we give it. Applying passes to neutralize the paralysis will restore him to normality. Such an operation, however, has to be done at the right time. Intensive regenerative resources are necessary, resources that are most likely to be found in groups where several collaborating individuals are in tune with one another on behalf of just one, if need be. Just then, Saldanin approached trustingly to ask for instructions. My benefactor, Saldanin addressed Gubbio reverently. Revealing the new situation too soon could cause an awful reaction against our efforts by the wrong persons. Quite frankly, this is all new to me, and I don't know where to start. Yes, I'm afraid you're right about that, Saldanin. We are too weak to fight against so many. It is absolutely essential that Margarita recover somewhat before we do anything more. Let's wait for nightfall. I intend to take the case to a group focused on fraternal love. Until then, we need to keep things as they are. Besides, Gaspar is also in need of special attention. His perispirit is very sick and corrupted and in need of charitable assistance.
Thank you.
Okay.
So will Gaspar ever be able to regain his natural senses? And the answer is, of course. If you have a minimum, a little bit of faith in God, and you understand God, not believe, but understand God as being omnipotent and not omnipresent, then it's easy for us to understand that every problem has a solution and will be resolved. That any problem generated by ourselves generates by itself a good learning opportunity. And that's why God allowed it to happen. But with his benevolence also provide means of resolution of all those problems. So Gaspar has created this problem for himself, and divine laws provided the opportunities of learning, of the learning opportunity, and means of the resolution of that problem. So yes, Gaspar problems, Gaspar situation can and will be resolved as ours, as everyone who has a problem, having a minimum of faith and looking and work for the solution, we'll find and we'll reach that solution. And Gaspar can use the assistance, the help of others by applying this magnetism that he's talking about. And I would quote, applying passes to neutralize the paralysis will restore his normality. Such an operation, however, has to be done at the right time. Intense regenerative resources are necessary, resources that are most likely to be found in groups where several collaborating individuals are in tune with one another on behalf of just one, if need be. What is he talking about here? He's talking about, I'm going to use our example, Spirit Center.
Yeah.
Is it only Spirit Center? No. Any group who combines the individual energies in one common good and one common objective may have this power of creating this magnetic energy, because it's a universal force. It doesn't say that it's a spiritist force. Magnetism is a universal force that follows the direction that we give to it, right? So a group of, I don't know, whatever you have in mind, of atheists, a group of Buddhists, of Muslims who congregate together, unite their energies towards one common objective, becomes a powerful instrument that will be multiplied, augmented by the spiritual forces who have the same common objective, and good things can happen. But unfortunately, bad things can also happen because those forces are neutral. What gives it a quality of being good or bad is the intention that you put on that exercise, on that of or how we utilize those universal forces. We start here, in our case, our Spirit Center. We start here what I always say in our meditation just before the spirit treatment of our responsibilities as individuals over there. We, the sick ones, we who are there asking for help to resolve one or many specific problems that we have, being physical, being emotional, being of a loved one. We all over there as sick individuals asking for help. What that was. We do also have the opportunity, the capability, the opportunity, and the responsibility of helping one another. Regardless of how bad my problem is, I still have some good within me that the person next to me, the person behind me, or the person in front of me can benefit from. And it is exactly in that exchange of fraternal love, the fraternal goodness, that we create that current, that we can help one another. And of course, we can always put all the energy together towards one common objective or one single person. And of course, in a leadership meeting, even more specifically of a Spirit Center, when we receive an spirit, or when we zero in our energies to help someone who is being obsessed, the process of disobsession, then both individuals will be assisted, the one being obsessed and the one doing the obsession. So the idea that very often hear individuals, people saying that in the leadership meetings, the spirits doesn't need us. We want to need them. They can do everything without us, perhaps. But we can see here now the importance of us in that meeting. How can we have this catalytic effect, perhaps abbreviating the suffering of individuals when they are able to use us as an instrument to assist those spirits in need. And again, Saldanha brings back the issue of quantity versus quality. And again, Saldanha agrees. Yes, I am afraid you are right about that, Saldanha. We are too weak to fight against so many. And later on, we're going to see when the director of the Spirit Center explains a little bit the association of the two planes of work in the spiritual work and the physical work. Why sometimes we are too weak. The goodness is too weak to fight the quantity of the evil ones. But we see the importance of Spirit Center, the importance of mediumship meetings. And of course, you can extend that to any group of individuals, of any religions, of any doctrine, of anything that unites, put the energy towards goodness. And unfortunately, the negative effect this can also have if that group unite towards less noble objectives as well. Okay, comments, questions?
Okay.
Okay.
Gubbio had barely finished his remarks when Gabriel entered the room and sat next to his dispirited and smithed wife. Now in charge of the situation, Gubbio approached him gently and placed his fatherly right hand on Gabriel's brow to instill his mind with inspiration by giving cause to the magnetic forces capable of arriving at a favorable solution to the case. I noticed that under this renewing influence, Margarita's husband began to lovingly contemplate his wife. He held her hand with real tenderness and said, "Margarita, it pains me to see you like this, so downcast." Neither one said anything for a while until Gabriel, with a light of indefinable hope in his eyes, exclaimed, "Listen, I just got an idea. It's been several days now, and all these strong medicines and drastic measures haven't done a thing for you. Would you be willing to let me seek the help of a friend of mine who is involved in Christian spiritism?" Touched by that wave of blessed caring which was flowing imperceptibly from Gubbio through Gabriel, the patient opened her eyes, full of renewed interest, as if she had found an unexpected pathway to salvation. She agreed happily. I'm ready. I'm ready and willing. I'll agree to any means that you might consider as right and worthy." In a rapture of hope, Gabriel left in a hurry, followed by Gubbio, who asked us to stay behind with Saldanen and get ready for that night's work. I did not waste any time in getting to know the ex-persecutor better. This experience was completely new to me, and I wanted to broaden my knowledge and resources. I thought of myself as an incomplete worker. Thus, I needed to keep on learning. I approached the tormentor turned friend and asked, "Saldanen, I was wondering why we have to be so concerned about our wayward fellow spirits."
Thanks. Okay, so continue with the story. Now, Gubbio seems that he is ready to approach the issues of Margarita more directly. As we said in the beginning, so far we can see here that Gobio has work on the outside layers
What?
of Margarita.
You changed anything?
What is that?
She's still sleeping.
Bed?
Yeah, no. She said he's
Okay, who is that there?
Let's see if we get her up before you go. And I'll do it. I'm sorry.
Okay, let's continue. So it seems that the approach of Gubbio, the strategy of Gubbio to help Margarita, it starts in the periphery of Margarita so far, right? It's, I mean, he's helping Saldanha, and by helping Saldanha loved ones, he's helping Leoncio by helping Leoncio's loved ones, and he's, you know, working the periphery, breaking down the powers who are attacking Margarita first before he goes for Margarita directly. And it seems that right now he is ready to approach Margarita in a more direct way. And his resource now is to use Gabriel, with his Margarita's husband, influencing him to influence her to accept to go to a place where they practice what they call here Christian spiritism, which is redundancy. You know, if you use the word spiritism, you're directly inferring Christianity. So I personally don't like, but unfortunately, it's a vice of language that is very unfortunate, in my opinion. But it's there, and cannot take it off because it's not my book. Because if it was mine, that this Christian would never be there. And in this process, another person get the benefit of it, and many others, as we can see in the future. Gaspar also is in need of special attention because Gaspar is kind of attached to Margarita by his hypnotic force that he applies on Margarita. They are pretty much connected. Now it's almost a paralytic situation here. He is like a parasite attached to Margarita, sucking her energies. In this process of helping Margarita, another person should benefit from it. In this case, is Gaspar. So they're getting ready to bring Gabriel and Margarita to a spiritual center, and along the way, of course, Gaspar will come together. And Saldanha going to stay behind with Andre Luiz while Gubbio goes to that spirit center and arrange things and get things ready for the evening. And Andre Luiz, I'm sorry, does not waste the opportunity to figure out a few things that is bothering him about Saldanha. And he started to question Saldanha, about Saldanha himself, trying to understand how this transformation happens, how Saldanha can go from pretty much 180 degrees of change in mind. How is it even possible? I mean, I just spoke in the beginning, and I truly believe that all the evolutionary path is a process, is something goes methodically. It doesn't, there are no big leaps in evolution. How did it happen to Saldanha? And here you're gonna see what Saldanha has to say about it. Questions, comment? Okay.
Okay. He looked at me in amazement and replied, "My dear friend, I have a full grasp of the situation. If we were to fight openly with this young woman at our side while she is so weak physically, we would suffer defeat in a matter of minutes. Here in these lower realms, evil is the dominant force everywhere. We are being watched closely, and we can't do a thing about it. To confront the evil and defeat it, we have to have the prudence and selflessness of the angels. Otherwise, we are wasting our time, and we will fall defenseless into the perilous traps of the darkness." Our new ally glanced around the room to check whether or not we were being listened to by enemies, and then continued. "Take me, for instance. Right after I got here, I did everything I could to run from evil, but it was futile. Time had not wiped from my memory the old prayers I had learned at home. But when I said them out loud, they only aroused the cruel sarcasm of the enemies of the good. Even though the will to improve myself was sincere in my heart, the truth of the matter was that my head was full of bad thoughts. I made some effort to resist, but down deep, my impulse towards the true good was a mild breeze before a typhoon. Surrounded by all these vengeful discarnates, I lost what moral composure I still had left. If the soul, freed from the corporeal body, is not endowed with strong principles of sanctifying virtue, it is nearly impossible to come out victorious from the dark traps they set for us. But I objected. Isn't that attitude merely a reflection of unsustainable ignorance? I guess so, Saldanin conceded, surprising me with the clarity of his argumentation. However, you know that the greatest difficulty is not due to our ignorance per se, but our hard-heartedness against change. Wisdom overcomes ignorance, goodness humiliates perversity, and true love surrounds hatred in an iron circle. Even so, those that are willingly stranded in the lower realms wield 1,000 weapons of spite, slander, envy, and jealousy, lies and discord against the good, causing mental imbalance and discouragement. As I thought about the resourceful, clear logic of what he was saying, I stated, "Your own case is a living example. I'm surprised by your intelligent remarks. There's no way you can be seen as ignorant." "Oh, I'm intelligent, all right," replied the ex-tormentor with a smile. "Educated too. I'm fully informed about all my duties. Even so, I need the company of someone who can show me the effectiveness and security of the good amidst so much evil. Let's imagine someone who's hungry, listening to a lecture. Do you think words are going to satisfy the demands of his stomach? Well, that's exactly what happened in my case. I was so preoccupied with my wife and daughter-in-law that had discarnate in such dreadful mental imbalance, and I was so tormented by my crazy son and granddaughter that there was no mental room in my head for theories about salvation. The kindly Gubbio, however, has shown me that good is more powerful than evil. That was quite enough to satisfy me. During times of doubt, beneficial enlightenment characterizes true charity. Saldanin looked around with a look of extreme distrust and emphasized, "However, from my own experience, I do know who the rebellious spirits are, because they comprise a group that I was part of until just yesterday. To be honest, I'm not really sure what's going to happen to me. They'll probably hound me without mercy. If they can, they'll halt me off to the valley of unspeakable misery. Even so, I can foresee my spirit's wholesome transformation. I'm sure that good can overcome evil, and I hope that our instructor will not forsake me. Even if I do have to suffer, I will follow him. I don't plan on going back to my former repugnant ways." Dionisio, who had been following our conversation, stated in turn, "I can't serve in the ranks of vengeance any longer either. I've had enough of it.
Thank you. I got the Spirit's book. One of my favorite questions because it's my favorite problem. Question 9009 in the Spirit's book, and I'll read just to be a quotation, meaning it's not coming from me, it comes from the Spirit's book. Kardec asks, are an individual's own efforts enough to vanquish his or her bad tendencies? And here's the answer. Yes. A very small effort is often all that's needed.
Mm.
It is the will that's missing. It is quite astonishing for a few of you. I'm sorry. It is quite astonishing how a few of you makes any serious effort. So the answer from the spirits here is one that really baffles me for everything that we learned, or at least that I used to believe until this question, was that change are extremely difficult. To change ourselves is extremely hard. And the answer from the spirit is, no, it is easy, as long as you have the will. It is the will that is missing. So the greatest hardship that we face is to give this 180 degrees of change to our will, to our desires, through sincere desire, not fooling ourselves. That's missing. And why do I go to this question and answer? Because I think there is a contradiction of what Saldanha is saying over here, and Saldanha will repeatedly contradict himself when he says over here that once he found himself in the spiritual world, he had good intention. He has ill intended. He was not supposed to end up being this hardcore persecutor. I'm sorry. You're not supposed to be this hardcore. Honey, get her. Sorry, guys. He was not supposed to be this hardcore persecutor, leader of a faction to do evil. He was a relative average dude like us, has our difficulties, has some good things. He used to pray, actually. Once he died, he was praying, and all the spirits around him was laughing and make fun of him with his prayers. And he says that even though the will to improve myself was sincere in my heart, the truth of the matter is that my head was full of bad thoughts. Okay, which bad thought was that? Was not seeking a payback to those who have harmed his family, and not really being able to exercise forgiveness that is so powerful and strong. The true liberator is forgiveness, one who really opens the door of the prisons in darkness that we place ourselves. He was not able to do that. He still had those thoughts. Now, thoughts are guided by sentiments, and sentiments are guided by true, sincere will, desire. So even though he does believe and is absolutely sincere when he says that, even though the will to improve myself was sincere, he truly believes it. But if you go to the answer from the spirits, you see that in reality, deep inside, it was not really there. Why people does not quit smoke? And you say, oh, it's impossible. It's impossible because the will is not there. They believe that the will is there. They actually think that, but you go deep inside, then we question and we really go deep inside those individuals. They say, yeah, in reality, I have a relationship with cigarette smoking now that it's beyond really the physical addiction. I've seen that my friend is the only time that I can really reflect and see if I have a cigarette in my hand, this and that. And we see that that association to cigarettes is much powerful than the physical addiction, which is true, okay? But the physical addiction is easy to overcome once we overcome or once we acquire a true, sincere will, desire to quit smoking. And that goes for everything else. So you cigarette smokers, it's easy for us to understand. So even though they are full of good intention, that very small dot of the wickedness, that very small dot of desire to go towards something negative, in his case, to make justice to his own hand what that God has done to him and his family, or his son and his family, was enough to counteract any goodwill that he might have, and was enough to be the target that the wicked ones in the spiritual world will use, and they will not miss it, to get him, to involve him in that bombardment of negative energies that in his case and most of our cases, most of us there would be victimized just about the same way by those energies, and kind of surrender to the number. Again, the number, the quantity becomes important here, and the number keeps coming and coming to us. Quantity means something. Again, one stinging of a bee, it's painful, but it's not a big deal. But 100, 150 of them is a powerful thing that can lead to death. So number matters, and when we are not purified sufficiently to stay above those negative energies, we can, and very often we do, surround to those negative energies, and you start to believe even that that's where we belong, that's what we are meant to be and to do. And one of the biggest difficulties that we have in our spiritist meetings is indeed that, is to make spirits believe, well, we cannot make them believe, but introduce that notion, make them reflect upon that there is no two sides, it's just one side. There is only the side of goodness. That they do not belong, they are not part of a darkness. They place themselves there temporarily, and they can take themselves out of that and be where we all belong, that with the light. It's very hard to make individuals start to think like that. And the best way to do is exactly what Gruber has done here, by motivating the individual to kind of allow the love that we all have inside to shine bright. And when it does eliminate darkness. Because one little candle can provide enough light to a large range and eliminate the darkness. And we see here also what we all said, that of course it comes from the good spirits, that our problem today is not of knowing, that the problem today is of doing. And it's exactly in that point where the will comes so strongly. Because you might know as much as you want, but if you don't have the will to apply it, the knowledge becomes kind of meaningless. That Saldanha says, oh yeah, I'm intelligent, all right. I know a lot of things. I was educated too. But lacking that will, I become weak through the numbers, to the number, the bombardment of negative energies, being that lower zones where I belonged at that time, as Saldanha said, I was not able to rise above, to think above, to produce sentiments noble enough that generate thought, energy, that keeps myself above that bombardment of negative energies, and end up surrounded by it and surrendered to it. And again, he expresses here, that's where I said that he's almost converted, that the conversion is again a process. When he says, to be honest, I am not really sure what's going to happen to me. He knows that unless he really keeps himself, now I believe that he has that understanding now that unless he really keeps his thoughts, his sentiments elevated, he could again be victimized by numbers, by the bombardment of negative energies. And he is in a hard place right now. The truth is in a difficult situation right now. He was just recently on the other side. He jumped to the fence. He joined, in a way, the enemies. And he will be targeted. There's no question about that. They will go after him. They will try to go after him. And he knows that. And that's a pretty hard situation to be. He cannot go back anymore. One thing that we say in our spiritist meetings, when we speak with spirits that we see that have gained a little bit of their understanding, have brought shyness to the energy of love inside of their own hearts, they cannot go back. They are not that person anymore. And now they find themselves in a hard situation that they don't know if you can trust the other side. They have been victimized in the past, but they're pseudo good, but they also cannot go back anymore. And that's a situation that Saldanha faces himself now. He knows that he's at risk. He knows that he will need a lot of help, but he has appeared to have, he believes that he has gained enough at this point that he'll be able to outstand, even if he has to go and suffer. He's not going to go back to his old ways. He had seen enough evidence of the power of good to ally himself with the bad now. He believes in it. Personally, I think he had reached that point. But the truth is the only time will tells us that, will tell him that. And with that, Leonce, who was listening to that conversation, kind of agree. I also had enough with persecution, with the thoughts of revenge. I am a new man. I started writing a new chapter of my existence now. Questions, comment? I think this page is extremely rich, and there's a lot there that I have not touched because I missed it. Somebody can help me out to be good. If not, continue to read.
Okay. I told them that I understood, and on behalf of our guide, I promised they can count on shelter on a higher plane. They were smiling happily when Gubbio returned to the patient's quarters and informed us that the problem had been taken care of. That night, Margarita and Gabriel would be attending a family meeting, an important center of mediumistic help. The incarnate patient and a traumatized hypnotizer would both receive effective resources and eagerly waited for nightfall. We eagerly waited for nightfall. From time to time, Gubbio would place his hand on the patient's brow to increase her overall resistance. Around 8 p.m., a car arrived to pick up the couple. They were accompanied by us and a large group of ovoids that was still connected to the patient's brain through magnetization. Saldanan had taken measures to outwit all the troublemaking spirits who had been planned on following us. He had put them at ease, saying that the matter was being taken care of, which is a fact. When we arrived at the comfortable abode, we were well received.
Thanks. Okay, so keep things quick over here. Not much to add. Andre Luiz took the liberty to speak for Gubbio and assure that both Saldanha and Leoncio would be assisted, that they would not be abandoned, that they start the project of self-recovery with the help of Gubbio and that group, and that help would continue. That would be taken to places where they could continue this process of regeneration. Gubbio comes back after making the arrangements in the Spirit Center where they would be going, and continue to provide spiritual energies to Margarita to keep her focused on the work that's going to happen later. And in that process, not only Margarita will receive help, but also Gabriel, and Gaspar. And when the time came in, they got ready to go to the center, and they go, and with them, beside Gaspar, a group of ovoids that was still connected to the patient brains through magnetization. And when the other spirits, the still rude spirits, question, well, where are you guys going? And so Daniel told them, again, know what about, everything's taken care of, everything is good, which indeed was taken care of. Not the way those spirits expected, but yes, everything is taken care of. You can continue.
Okay. Mr. Sylvia, the head of the family, welcomed Gabriel and Margarita with unequivocal displays of caring. Saldonio, the spirit director of the upcoming work, extended his fraternal arms to us. Inside were 4 men and 3 women, the usual members of the family circle. They began exchanging thoughts with the visitors, reassuring them and explaining what would be happening. Finally, the clock showed that it was time to get started. Gubbio asked about the group. Sundonio explained, our group has been having satisfactory results. Nonetheless, it could do an even better job if the trust in the good and the ideal of serving was stronger amongst our collaborators in the physical realm. We know that the instrumentality is an essential part of any type of endeavor. The arm is the instrument of the thought. The worker is the supplement of the administrator. The apprentice is the vehicle of the master. If we do not have any incarnates to correspond to our sanctifying objectives, how can higher spirituality be established on the earth. In fact, we have found brothers and sisters who are ready and willing to lend their fraternal concourse. But needless to say, most of them are hoping for some sort of spectacular display of mediumship to warrant cooperating with us. They don't seem to realize that all of us are mediums of either good or evil to some degree, depending on our receptive faculties. They do not accept the requirements of the service that urges us to seek self-enlightenment by serving our fellow
Sorry.
our fellow beings, and they expect mediumistic gifts as if they were miraculous bestowals to be given gladly to those who want their benefits using the old magic wand. They seem to have forgotten the mediumship is an energy that everyone possesses to a greater or lesser extent of exteriorization, an energy that is subject to the principles of direction and the law of use, just like a whole can be used to either serve or harm, depending on the impulse that directs it. Mediumship continues to strengthen when used methodically, whereas it gets covered with asphyxiating and destructive rust if it is left lying around. Our friends do not realize the value of fearless attitude and positive faith on the praiseworthy pathway, come what may. And although we look after their faith with the same care that an industrious farmer looks after the tender shoot that contains the hope of the future, all it takes is a subtle visit by malicious and perverse spirits, like blackbirds in a rice field, and the fine seeds that we have incessantly planted in the soil of their hearts fall to sprout. From one moment to the next, they doubt our efforts, they distrust themselves, and they close their eyes to the grandeur of the laws that surround them in the nooks and crannies of nature. The mental energies that they should use to focus on active and sanctifying construction with an eye on their own spiritual growth are discarded almost daily by the deceitful arguments of ungrateful and ignorant spirits. Taking advantage of a pause, I ventured to ask.
Thanks.
Okay.
So they arrived at this spiritual center that happens to be the household of this Silva family, which was not uncommon at that time in Brazil, that most of the spiritual centers began as meetings of individual sympathizers to the doctrine who would get together to study the books and try to understand it better. And those groups who kept fidelity to the studies and desire to develop themselves in that doctrine, eventually be inspired to organize mediumship meetings and would have meetings like that one, like the one here in Mr. Silva household. They would have a group of mediums, probably 7. That's the count of mediums they had. The Rudonite, it's an amazing number, in my opinion. And these are the outposts, we can say, in the physical world that the good spirituality can use for assistance, not only of this kind of spirit, but also of us incarnate spirits. In the case, Margarita. And Gubbio asked this Sidonian, that Sidonian was the leader or the director of that spiritual center in the spiritual world. You know, just to remind what we all know, we have our group here in the physical world. We have a director, we have a group of workers, we have the ostensive mediums, I have the less ostensive mediums. Everyone is a medium, as so well explained here by Sidonio. Each one with a task ones that requires a more ostensive or they require less ostensive kind of mediumship, but all putting that mediumship at work, doing your best to be an instrument to serve the good spirits to do their work. And Sidonia asked exactly, tell us about explaining that about that group. And tells about our reality, right? He's speaking about us over here. Sidonia is giving a pretty good sincere truth about ourselves here, right? That's pretty much what we are. And my apologies if someone listening does not fit in this description of Sidonian. But yeah, we go to the Spirit Center. We spend our 2, 3, 4, 6 hours, perhaps 6 hours a week, so to say, right? And what about the other hours? We need to remember and understand that we are mediums 24/7. We are not medium when we are in the center, when we are receiving more extensive communications. We are medium 24/7. We have the ability to exchange energies with the spiritual world, receive and give 24/7. What do we do with our mediumship when we are not in the center? When we are there receiving all those energies, all those messages, when we, more important, open ourselves to receive all that, and we have that true, sincere desire of being helpful, being good, we elevate ourselves, so to say, in a way that our mediumship become a really good instrument of goodness. But what do we do with that mediumship when we are not in the spiritual center? How does it affect the quality of the work when we are in the spiritual center? How the devices may corrupt somewhat ourselves in our potential of being a better servant. So Sidon tells us, our group has been having satisfactory results. Nonetheless, it could be an even better job if the trust in good and the idea of serving were stronger amongst our collaborators in the physical realm. Doesn't what I think that it pretty much tells about most of us. And then go to the discussion over here of what is a mediumship, right? They don't seem to realize that all of us are mediums of either good or evil to some degree, depending on our receptive faculties. It states over here that all of us are mediums. You have a tendency to consider medium only those with a more extensive ability of psychography or psychophony, of seeing mediums, but the ability to exchange energies, to exchange thoughts between the two planes of existence, we all have. And we can also be mediums, being an intermediary of those two planes, for the good or for the bad. What do you choose to serve? How do you choose to serve? That will depend in our receptive faculties, right? What resides in my heart really will determine how that mediumship will be used. The necessity, the importance, when Jesus tells us, be vigilant and pray. Be really vigilant with your thoughts, with your sentiments. And pray to help to maintain yourself with more elevated thoughts, or to more elevated sentiments, to generate more purified thoughts, that you can use that mediumship 24/7 in the service of good. And then he repeats over here, they seem to have forgotten that mediumship is energy that everyone possesses to a greater or lesser extent of exteriorization, an energy that is subject to the principles of direction and the law of use, just like a hoe can be used to either serve or harm, depending on the impulse that directs it. So, one of the great, in my opinion, advantage of being an spiritist is that we're exposed to these concepts. They're trying to understand those things because everyone has it, but not everyone has. Here's where a knowledge becomes important. Now we know that we have this potential, and now we know that we can direct this potential towards one direction or another. Which direction do we choose to direct it? Again, vigilance and prayer becomes extremely important at this point. We have quite a bit. I believe we can finish it because the rest of here can be easily discussed. Any questions, any comments at this point? Okay, let's continue then.
Okay. Can that be the case in a group that is as harmoniously constituted as this one? Are we to believe that a group that has been organized for wholesome purposes like this one can become a den of depressing forces? Sandonio smiled good-humoredly and replied, yes, considered collectively, they are all together right now under this friendly roof and are seeking our spiritualizing company. But that is for only 6 out of the 168 hours of the week. While here with us, they are enveloped in gently radiations of peace and joy, of good cheer and hope, as they register our edifying vibrations, of which we love for them to be sure and permanent bearers, taking them into the daily realm of the human struggle. However, as soon as they are only a little ways from these doors, they accept or send out thousands of subtle thoughts that are much different from the ones we have suggested to them, thoughts that conflict with our work plan, thoughts which, born from the minds of incarnates and discarnates, flog us mercilessly. Very few understand that faith is a blessing that can be increased indefinitely. Hence, they flee the work that the preservation, consolidation, and growth that such a gift offers to all of us. Furthermore, when this or that brother or sister displays an advanced ability to serve the common good on behalf of the realm of light during sleep, they are usually visited immediately by bad spirits that are interested in extending the realm of darkness. They break down their convictions and newly born purposes with unwholesome insinuations if their minds are not supported appropriately by an intense desire to progress, redeem themselves, and press forward. This explanation was highly interesting, and it would have been nice to have heard more on the subject, but the clock showed that it was time for us to get to work. For the endeavors of the meeting, consisting of 9 incarnates, there were 21 spirit collaborators from our plane of action. Gubbio and Saldonio worked together, giving Margarita magnetic passes to finally detach the ovoid bodies, which were then entrusted to a commission of 6 fellow spirits, who in turn carefully took them to emergency outposts. Then, during the prayer and the gospel study, amid contributions from our spheres, a large number of neutral energy with just the right amount of reinvigorating fluids from our plane was extracted from the mouths, nostrils, and hands of the incarnate assistants. Sandonio and Gubbio then applied these energies to Margarita and Gaspar to restore their own paraspiritual energies. Margarita immediately began to display blessed signs of relief, and Gaspar, impassive as he had been, began to mourn, as if he were waking up from a long, frightful nightmare. At this point, Rubio prepared Doña Isora, the lady of the house and medium, for the meeting by applying magnetic passes to her larynx and especially to her nervous system, thus assisting her faculty of incorporation. When the time came for the incarnates to begin their work of Christian love on behalf of the discarnates, guides led Gaspar over the medium so that he could receive some benefit upon coming in contact with the incarnates, who began supplying him revitalizing energies, as happens to flowers that support the wholesome toil of industrious bees without even realizing it. I could see that the senses of the unfeeling persecutor took on an unexpected perception. His vision, hearing, touch, and smell suddenly woke up and intensified. He seemed like an awakening somnambulist. The more he combined his own energies with those of the medium, the more his senses were activated. As he temporarily grasped Doña Isola's organic resources by means of psychic grafting, the hypnotizer cried out and began weeping ruefully. He mixed blasphemies with tears and moving words with bad ones amid penitence and rebelliousness. With his hearing now fully restored, he could converse clearly with the meeting's instructor in a spiritually constructive lesson that touched our innermost fibers. Mr. Xavier, Isolia's husband, enabled Gaspar to grasp the need for spiritual renewal. After a full hour of exhausted emotional dialogue, 2 assistants from our team took him to a place for mentally imbalanced spirits where he could gradually recover his right mind. The work was finished, the meeting ended, and an immense joy overflowed from everyone's hearts. Margarita felt relief at last. In tears, she asked Gabriel to thank everybody for the gift she had received. Rubio, however, saw that Saldanan was a bit unnerved and remarked, "This is not yet the final triumphant. Margarita has received immediate assistance, but we must now assist her home until she can fully incorporate the benefits she has received into her individuality." He smiled benevolently and added, "For a plant to be useful, it is not enough for it to be beautiful and fragrant in a protective greenhouse. It needs to be outside where it can consolidate its strength in order to be utilized for the common good." Arriving at an understanding with Sidonio, Gubbio elicited the cooperation of 12 assistants for 10 days to reinforce the defensive activities at Gabriel's home, since according to Saldanan and Leoncio, starting tomorrow, we can expect all-out war with Gregorio's henchmen, who would descend on us, dreadful and persistent.
Okay. And that's the end of the chapter. I'm glad we were able to finish. And in the discussion about our responsibility as mediums who have gained the understanding of our potentials, we who assume the responsibility to work with this mediumship, each one of us at our own level. There are extensive mediums doing the wonderful work of donating themselves for the communications, the ones who have the responsibility to have a powwow, talk with the spirits, and all with the perhaps even greater responsibility of giving themselves the energies in the work of vibration assisting. The spirits are so well described over here. How will it be possible for Gaspar to really be assisted without all those bombardment of good energies to neutralize his own negative energies that he had within himself, plus to neutralize the hypnotic energies for the more powerful evil spirits who are dominating him at the moment. There would be no success in that meeting. And Sidonio brings back the necessity of us to be extremely vigilant we live in the lower zones. We are in the lower zones and we are bombarded by energies compatible with the lower zones. But we can, with these instruments, spiritism, with the help of the good spirits, elevate ourselves above those energies and protect ourselves and be able to be a good instrument, helping those in need. In the process, we are helping ourselves, as we see the example here. So we see here that the work, those who participate in leadership meetings are well familiar. They were able to help a bunch of ovoids, take them for treatment. They did not communicate. What we also, in spirit, we are done and just have another 3 minutes, please. I apologize. Those ovoids has been helped also. They are now being taken to places where they will initiate the process of recovery. One can imagine that it will take a long, long time for that to happen. What remind in the Spirit Center, not only those who communicate are being assisted, the assistance goes around for many others. So those avoids is being helped. And I put a question mark here. I mean, just get lucky, I mean, we say that they're because they deserve, because they are ready. And this, I'll put a question mark here and I'll leave as a question mark because I don't have the answer. Really is a question for those who know more than I to answer. But Gaspar was really assisted. And after a confrontation, 1 hour of discussion, in our meeting, we have the most 10 minutes for each spirit. Can you imagine the beauty of having 1 hour of conversation with the spirits? I'd love that. He also was able to be helped. And of course, in doing that, Margareta received tremendous amount of help. But the work's not done. Now that they see how did that happen, the powers of evil are gonna be even more upset. Now we really kick them off. And you have to be ready to outstand the bombardment that household will receive. And of course, Rubio has a plan for it. And by working outside, on the outside of Margaret, working the periphery, in his strategy, he had already prepared himself for this bombardment with the assistance of Saldanha and Leoncio, which definitely will be fundamental for the success of this project. I hope it was enough to generate questions that I'm not going to be able to answer now. It's finished. Write them down, please. Write them down for our Q&A. Bring them back. I think this is a very, very powerful chapter in this book. That if it does not generate questions, something's wrong with us. But we need to finish over here. And we finish with a prayer as we elevate our hearts and minds to God. To our beloved Master Jesus Christ. After being exposed